Over the years, the Transformers franchise had its fair share of success through various media, including toys, films, cartoons, and even board games. So it was only a matter of time before the franchise decided to delve into the video game market. However, this is where we have a problem. As most of these games are designed as movie or cartoon tie-ins, and as a result a means of giving Hasbro a ton of money, only a select few of them are actually good. But at least there's hardly any middle ground with the various Transformers games. So instead of counting down my 10 favourite Transformers games, I'm instead counting down the 5 games I really enjoyed, and the 5 games that should go join ET for the Atari over in that landfill somewhere. Now just sit back, relax, and let the games begin.
You fail me yet again, Starscream. Get them!
While this game isn't exactly terrible, I'm putting it on the list because of just how downright disappointing the whole game was. May I present Transformers Rise of the Dark Spark, or at least the console version. I really wanted to like this game, and I had really high hopes for it given how amazing the previous 2 games were. Although I suppose the fact that this game had a different developer should have been the first red flag. This game serves as a crossover between the live-action film series and the War for Cybertron games, and the main plot involves the villains using the titular Darkspark to win the Transformers War or restart the whole thing all over again. However, this is where the main problems start. Instead of having the 2 series merged together and have characters from both series interact, what actually happens is we get the Cybertron story happening first, with the Darkspark being ejected into space at the end, which then follows into the Earth side of the story. This means that it feels like 2 different games smashed together, and the transition between the 2 stories feels really awkward and not as fluid as it should have been. Then we have the gameplay. Admittedly, the levels on the Cybertron side were interesting and varied and quite well done, as they featured a lot of segments where the gameplay was changed up a little. The multiplayer wasn't too bad either, the customization was the most expansive of the series, and there's a crap ton of characters to play as, even those you wouldn't really expect. I mean, we don't see Scattershot, Motormaster and Quake doing much these days, do we? Unfortunately, that ultimately feels like that was the only thing the developers put effort into, and considering how that isn't the game's main focus, that's actually pretty bad. Then we come to the Earth levels, which is clearly the point where they honestly stopped trying. These levels are honestly some of the most boring I've played. The environments are bland, they're extremely repetitive, and some are just blatant rehashes of previous levels with certain things switched around. Which means the dev team simply didn't care or just ran out of ideas. That's not even mentioning the Drift and Grimlock levels. From watching the character trailers, I got the impression that Drift levels would be a hack-and-slash game, and Grimlocks would be an awesome rampage of destruction. But nope! Drift plays like any other character, despite how the character has never used guns before, and Grimlock's levels are just a rip-off of the same levels from Fall of Cybertron. What the hell went wrong with this game?
Damn, I'm good.
The one thing I love in any game is customization. Tweaking your character's stats, weapons and other aspects allows every person's experience with the game to be different, and it allows one person to have a different experience with each playthrough, which just adds to the replay value. So it was really only a matter of time before we got a Transformers game based on this aspect, and leave it to the team behind Revenge of the Fallen's tie-in DS games to deliver. With the oh-so-innovative title of Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, this is actually 2 games, one focusing on the Autobots and one focusing on the Decepticons. While the games follow slightly different stories, each remaining sort of faithful to the source material, there isn't that much variation between them. Each game has you playing as a new recruit to each faction, and has you completing missions and challenges around the world map in order to advance the story, and to unlock new customization options. At the start of the game, you choose what vehicle form your character will have for the rest of the game, either light, medium, or heavy. The light vehicle form has less health and melee damage than the others, but can move faster, jump higher, and can use longer melee combos. The medium form has a jack of all stats, and the heavy form has more health and stronger melee moves, but can't move as fast, jump as high, or combo as effectively as other forms. There isn't really one form that's better than the others, it all comes down to your preferred style of play. Then we have a bunch of other custom options that you can unlock through getting higher rankings in missions, or simply by finding them in the levels. These affect all kinds of things, such as your movement speed, vehicle speed, dodge distance, maximum health, shield duration, weapon and melee damage, and even transformation speed. You can even change what weapon your character has in their primary and secondary slots, meaning that one mission you could have a rocket launcher and a laser gun, and switch to a freeze-ray Gatling gun on the next. However, there are a couple of things that aren't really all that great. The levels where you play as a flying character weren't implemented as well as they should be, certain missions suffer from bad enemy placement, there's massive difficulty spikes in some areas, and the bosses were just the same fight repeated 3 times over. Despite this, they're not half bad games, and if you're on a DS or a 3DS and are a Transformers fan, I'd recommend giving these games a shot.
You fail me yet again, Starscream. Get them!
Good lord, what was 2007 me thinking? I used to really like this game. I really did. But now I see it for what it really is. A shameless, broken shamble of a game simply made to make Hasbro and Paramount Studios money. Such is the sad case of Transformers the game for PSP. At first, this game doesn't seem too bad. The first 2 levels left me feeling hopeful, and the online multiplayer isn't too bad. However, the levels after that are boring, mostly empty, and have layouts more confusing than the freaking water temple. I seriously got lost multiple times simply because the game made no attempt to tell me where it is I was supposed to go, and the graphics look like absolute shit. I know this was released in the early days of the PSP, but these graphics are muddier than the worst games on the N64. Not to mention that the game has a massive difficulty spike halfway through, which makes it impossible to take down a group of more than 2 enemies head on without suffering massive damage, and this also gives them tons of health. And this also makes boss battles downright impossible. It took me 2 hours to take down the mid-game boss due to how much health it had, and the final boss took me at least 3.5 hours to kill. And that's not even the final boss, as there's another bonus level set after that, which is even harder and more annoying. Then we have the game's biggest problem, the controls. While the robot controls aren't too bad aside from the really slow movement speed and really sluggish melee combat, the vehicle controls are just... no. The ground vehicles are slow to accelerate and have steering worse than Half-Life 2's airboat. It's pretty much impossible to get the helicopter to turn and get it to where you want to go, and it's as slow as fuck. The jet isn't too bad unless you want to go up or down, or stop. And don't even bother playing as Megatron, whose space jet vehicle form for some reason has vastly different controls to the regular jet, which makes it pretty much impossible to do anything aside from move in a straight line. Then there's the one thing that completely ruins this game. The collision damage. Normally, only crashing into something at high speed would cause collision damage, but in this game, simply touching anything when in vehicle form will deal damage to you. This makes the one helicopter level pretty much impossible, and some of the jet levels and highway chase levels are massively affected by this. Not to mention the fact that only jet characters can take full damage, and that only occurs when transforming back to robot form, while there is no solid surface beneath you, makes me honestly be glad to finally be rid of this crap.
Damn, I'm good.
While 2007 me was a complete idiot, 2008 me was a fucking genius. Why? I managed to find one of the most overlooked games on the Nintendo DS. Transformers Autobots and Decepticons. Again, like the previous entry, there are both Autobot and Decepticon versions of the game, with the only variation being the story and with a heavy focus on customization. However here, the customization is more based around customizing your vehicle form and appearance, with each form having base preset stats, which means you need to choose the form that works best for a particular mission. Unlike its pseudo-sequel, this game doesn't have a world map, but instead has multiple overworlds that you can explore between missions. These overworlds range from an expansive urban city to the Arctic ice sheets, and even a desert military base and Las Vegas-style casino strip. Admittedly, these worlds are significantly smaller than those in other games, but there's quite a lot you can do in them. Fight enemies to gain experience towards leveling up, scanning new vehicle forms, take on challenge missions like races or defeating enemies in time limit, or just exploring. However, there is a slight problem. Due to the games being based on the first movie, humanity hasn't become aware of the Transformers' existence yet. Cause too much damage in the overworld or just stay in robot form too long in the presence of humans will activate the game's threat level system, which works sort of like the one found in Grand Theft Auto. The only way to get the level to decrease is to transform into vehicle form and invade the police and military for as long as possible. After all, they're looking for a robot, not a sports car. Or you could just change your vehicle from the pause menu or start a mission to reset the meter. It's your choice what you do. However, this can be annoying due to the massive damage caused by the vehicles sent in on higher threat levels, and these things are all over the Hoover Dam overworld and missions. Meaning that we have yet another game that is plagued by difficulty spikes, and annoying ones at that. However, due to the level up system which grants you increased health and firepower at higher levels, if you find yourself dying at the same place in one particular mission over and over again, you can simply quit the mission, go and level up by doing a few challenge missions, and come back and try again. Unfortunately, this isn't the only problem. If you want to try and 100% these games, don't bother. 1 or 2 challenge missions are glitched so you can't ever complete them before time runs out, and certain vehicle forms, including the elusive jet form, were only available to download over Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. which, as we all know, was taken down in 2013, meaning that these things were lost forever. Oh well, this is Decepticon's version of Starscream as a playable character, so that should satisfy your jet cravings for the time being.
You fail me yet again, Starscream. Get them!
The number 3 entry is Dark of the Moon Stealth Force Edition. What is one of the main selling points of the Transformers franchise, other than the actual robots? That's right, the fact that they transform. So why the hell will the developers of this game decide to take that away? Don't give me the excuse that the Wii's hardware couldn't take it. The DS managed to pull off transforming characters in a large open world, so that excuse doesn't work here. I get what they were trying to do by promoting the new Stealth Force vehicle forms, but that should not come at the expense of good gameplay and game design. It's always a risky idea to start with a gimmick and then base your game around said gimmick, but sometimes it can pay off, like what happened with Paper Mario and Gravity Rush. However, this game is one of the many examples where it didn't. Normally I'd welcome the idea of a Transformers vehicle, a combat style game, but when the best you can come up with is a pathetic clone of games like Twisted Metal or Carmageddon that controls worse than goddamn Bubsy 3D, I consider scrapping the entire thing. I'm not kidding, the controls are ridiculously unresponsive, it's pretty impossible to actually shoot anything, and switching between pure vehicle form and Stealth Force vehicle form is really awkward to get the hang of. Not to mention that the level design is some of the worst I've ever seen. The environments are bland beyond belief, even more so than the PSP version of Transformers the game, and that was on a less powerful console. And every single freaking mission is the exact same as the one before. Drive around completing enough of a certain task to open up the next objective. Destroy said objective, rinse and repeat, and you have the whole game. What makes matters worse is that while the Wii adaptation of the Revenge of the Fallen game took away the ability to transform freely like this game did, at least that game was actually a pretty solid beat-em-up, and that game came out 2 years before this one did. You see, it's crap like this that pretty much killed any hope I had that the Wii could ever have a decently made Transformers game.
Damn, I'm good.
After the atrocity that was Stealth Force Edition, my hopes for the HD console version of Dark of the Moon were pretty low, until I heard the magnificent people of High Moon Studios are behind this one, and boy did they manage to deliver. At its core, this game plays very much like the War for Cybertron series, with the over-the-shoulder style camera system, each character wielding their own special weapon, and each character having their own special abilities which can help you clear out a whole bunch of enemies. These special abilities are honestly really fun to use, and can really help out in tough spots. I mean, one of Ironhide's special abilities can pull out a minigun more powerful than the heavies, one of Bumblebee's turns him into a whirling yellow cyclone of death, and Megatron's allows him to drain health from enemies, and spawn little robotic spiders to tear your enemies to shreds. One other thing I need to mention is that unlike most Transformers games, each level is based around each character's specialty. One level has you in the middle of an air battle as Starscream, while another has you sneaking around the forest as Mirage, and another has you gunned down hundreds upon hundreds of Decepticons as Ironhide. Given how different each gameplay style is, this was naturally quite difficult to implement. However, High Moon Studios managed to not only pull this off, but managed to mesh the gameplay styles to create a rather unique experience. Like the other Transformers games made by High Moon, this game features online multiplayer. However, here it's a little more simplistic, with the only modes being a Team Fortress 2 style control point / capture the flag mode, along with your classic deathmatch and team deathmatch modes. But the multiplayer does allow you to play as 6 exclusive characters: Ratchet, Shockwave, Warpath, Breakaway, Crankcase, known here as simply Enforcer, and Megatron's Revenge of the Fallen body. There's also the DLC pack which gives you the option to play as Sideswipe and unlocks a bunch of new multiplayer maps. The boss fights of the game are also quite well done, with the exception of the admittedly average final battle against Shockwave and the mildly annoying fight against the Enforcer, although this is balanced out by the slightly tricky fights against Optimus Prime and Starscream, and a downright amazing fight against Stratosphere. You know what, just give these guys the rights to make every other Transformers movie tie-in game.
You fail me yet again, Starscream. Get them!
The rail shooter is honestly one of my least favourite genres, and while I enjoy playing Star Fox and House of the Dead from time to time, most of these types of games just feel like the developers took the easy way out and decided to make a game using as little effort as possible. It's sort of how app games work. There are some good ones among them, but most of the time you have to sift through a mountain of trash to get to the treasure. Where am I going with this? Transformers Cybertron Adventures, that's where. Learning nothing from our last entry, the developers of this monstrosity decided to make another attempt at making a cheap buck, leeching off the success of a much better game that's light years ahead of anything they could create, by putting a minuscule amount of effort into another Transformers game where you cannot even transform. I wouldn't have minded an arcade shooter set in the Transformers universe. I wouldn't have minded that it would be difficult to work in a transformation mechanic, but it turns out that doing that requires way too much effort and, God forbid, actual work. Instead of creating a vehicle mode mechanic which gives you different weapons, faster aim and increased armor at the cost of being able to duck behind cover, this game decided to stick the vehicle mode in some of the most boring on-rail segments I've ever played, and the robot mode segments feature bland design, predictable enemy patterns, and the game just features bad design choices overall. One big problem that the game has is the weapons. Only two, these being the blaster and the sniper rifle, are actually useful, and even they have their downsides. The blaster's a clip size which is way too small for you to rely on in crowded areas, and the sniper rifle can only fire 3 shots before reloading, which wouldn't be too bad if it didn't take about a year to reload. The other weapons aren't much better either. The cannon takes so long to charge it's borderline unusable, the Gatling gun, while having a high rate of fire, large clip size and quick reload time, deals so little damage it takes about a month to actually kill something, and the homing missile would be okay, except that it can only really damage flying enemies, and is really inaccurate when used against anything else, and takes forever to lock onto something. What makes matters worse is that the controls are really unresponsive in certain areas, so much so that the offline co-op feature, which was intended to make certain levels easier, ends up making them harder, as you'll just end up getting in each other's way. Then we have the level design. Certain areas feature really awkward enemy placement, some areas have too many enemies to deal with where others hardly have any, the vehicle sections are just the same over and over again with extremely sluggish controls and unfair hazards, and time sections barely give you enough time to complete your objective before getting an instant game over. Then there's the boss battles. All you know is that there's pretty much nothing to talk about. The bosses are just as terribly managed as the rest of the game, with some being so easy you forget they're supposed to be a boss, and others are as frustrating and annoying as datademics on crack. But you know what's even worse? There's still, somehow, one game that's even worse than this.
Damn, I'm good.
Remember High Moon Studios? Well, before they made the Dark of the Moon tie-in game, they presented the world with a certain little game known as Transformers War for Cybertron. Oh, sweet Jesus, I love this game. I've been wanting to talk about this one for so long. This game is one of my all-time favourite games. The story is the best it's ever been, the gameplay is fluid, the level design and general aesthetic appearance is amazing. Unlike every other instance of the Transformers mythos, this game is set on Cybertron rather than Earth, and serves as sort of a prequel to pretty much everything else. The main story is that during the war, both sides are beating each other into a stalemate, with the Autobots holding an extremely narrow advantage due to the strategic position of the cities under their control. This leads to Megatron acquiring the ancient destructive weapons in both Dark Energon and Decepticon Station, and this completely changes the balance of power in the war. I'm not going to say any more for fear of spoiling anything, but this game also gives an alternate interpretation of how Starscream joined the Decepticons, how Optimus became a Prime, and how Cybertron became unable to support life. The basic gameplay is also quite well done. Like the Dark of the Moon tie-in game, this game is a third-person shooter which plays like you'd expect it to. If you've ever played Mass Effect, Gears of War, or Uncharted, you know where I'm going with this. You can carry a maximum of 2 weapons, except here it doesn't matter which you carry. Assault rifle and pistol, chain gun and rocket launcher, or even 2 shotguns at once. And use of a cover system, melee attacks, and grenades. What sets this game apart from others like it is the vehicle form of each character allows you to add a whole new dimension to this gameplay style. Car form allows you to race around the battlefield, leaving your enemies in the dust and shredding them with machine gun fire. Truck form is a jack of all stats, allowing you to take more damage, shoot down airborne enemies with lock-on rockets, and ram into enemies at high speed for a one-hit kill. Tank mode, which is my personal favourite, allows you to blast away entire crowds of enemies with a single shot at the cost of speed, and jet form allows you to completely avoid the fight altogether, laying down fire from above and being able to cross large distances quickly. Each character also comes equipped with 2 special abilities, which allows you to gain an advantage over difficult enemies, and give you other options to play with. These abilities are split into 2 types: regular cooldown abilities, and the more powerful energon abilities. Cooldown abilities recharge over time and are generally simple utilities such as dashing, creating barriers, hovering, and cloaking. all of which are useful in hindering enemies and allowing you to get a better position. Energon abilities are recharged by simply defeating enemies, and they're generally a lot more powerful than cooldown abilities and allow you to deal some real damage. Spinning around like a whirlwind, spawning an attack drone, creating sentry turrets, and unleashing a devastating explosive clap attack are just some of the things you can do. Then there's the multiplayer, which is a lot more expansive than the games that came before it. The basic deathmatch and capture the flag modes are all there, but there's also a new mode called Detonation, where two teams race each other to grab bombs in the centre of the map and run back to place them in enemy base, with the first team to do this 3 times during the match. There's also another mode known as Escalation, which puts 4 players against endless waves of AI-controlled enemies, with more powerful enemies spawning in as the waves progress. Players can also earn energy on credits from defeating enemies, which can be used to unlock new weapons, activate environmental devices such as healing-generated sentry guns, and access new areas. Sort of like Halo's Firefight mode mixed with Call of Duty's Zombies mode. Honestly, what more could you want from a game?
You fail me yet again, Starscream. Get them!
Okay, we've seen games that are zero effort cash-ins. We've seen games that are too ambitious. And we've seen those that are buggy as hell. But this entry manages to top all of these. Number 1 is the Transformers, what the CDI games are to The Legend of Zelda. Number 1 is a game that has reached a status of infamy among the Transformers fandom, and it's considered to be one of the worst licensed games ever made. That game is none other than Transformers Convoy no Nazo. Seriously, what the fuck is this? For a start, where's the goddamn background? I know this was released for the NES, but even frickin' Super Mario Brothers managed to pull off something that doesn't look like baby's first video game project. What honestly made the dev team think that they could pull off a game featuring transforming robots on an 8-bit console? There's also the matter of the game having literally no story whatsoever. I know that it was the 1980s and that the 8-bit games at the time didn't have much of a story department, but at least we got a title screen explaining the basic premise, and the background to the game being on the back of the box and in the instruction manuals. But all we have in this game is the knowledge that it's based on the G1 movie, and a few sentences at the beginning of the game in extremely broken English. Speaking of the game being based on the movie, we're told that it takes place after the point when Optimus dies, so we can assume we're playing as Rodimus. However, it seems that the box art team, game design team, and story writers all had different ideas to who it is we're supposed to be playing as. We're told it's Ultra Magnus, but that can't be right as the colour scheme and head design look more like Optimus. But it can't be Optimus because he's dead at this point in the timeline, leaving only one of the candidates, Rodimus. However, it can't be him because Rodimus never had that much red in his colour scheme, and wasn't blue at all. And again, the head looks more like Optimus Prime's. You know what, so I'll just call him Rod Optimus Magnus Prime and call it a day. Then we have the matter of the gameplay, which is borderline unusable. The jumping is stiff, the shooting is awkward, the movement controls and hitboxes are downright appalling, and the game in general feels really sloppily made, and seems like something they just slapped together in the space of a few hours. Now we come to the one thing that stands out among this steaming pile of crap, more though than seeing a tap-dancing Pikmin with a sombrero during a multiplayer match in Halo 3. This, of course, is the boss battles. Or should I say, boss battle. While this game does have multiple bosses, each one is an exact repeat of the one that came before it, fought in the exact same arena, with the exact same attacks, and the only differences being increased health, movement speed, and attack speed. They didn't even bother to give these things different sprites, and just simply used the same sprite and retextured it, meaning that each boss has the same hitboxes. Meaning that at times, certain shots won't do anything, and some shots will hit empty space and still do damage. What kind of a lazy excuse for a video game is this?
Damn, I'm good.
I'm not alone in my opinion of the number 1 entry. In fact, a lot of gamers and critics believe it to be the best Transformers game of all time, and one of the best licensed games of the previous generation. That game is Transformers Fall of Cybertron. Sweet Jesus, where the hell do I even begin with this game? For starters, the story is just as impressive as its predecessor, picking up from where the previous game finished off. This time around, Cybertron is dying and the remaining Autobots must battle the Decepticon force in order to assemble a transport vessel that can take them safely off the planet. Naturally, you get a real sense of urgency while playing the game, and the updated graphics engine really helps to show off just how bad the situation has become. Buildings are falling apart, cities are rusting and decaying, craters and debris are everywhere, acid pools have sprung up in certain places, and the whole situation just feels really bleak. The characters appearing in the game also have some of their best interpretations I've seen. While the returning characters like Optimus, Bumblebee, Ironhide and Megatron and Starscream are all well done and return to top form like the last game, it is the new characters that truly stand out. Shockwave was always an evil scientist, but here we see just how evil and twisty he can be when he doesn't have the restrictions of the dreaded G rating. Grimlock and the Dinobots are the most fleshed out they've ever been, and while the Combaticons were no slouch in their previous appearance, here they're pretty much the Decepticon equivalent to a Black Ops unit. The gameplay also received a bit of a shake-up from the last one. While the basic third-person shooter gameplay style returned, this time the weapons were split into primary and heavy weapons, with different ammo types for each. The new heavy weapons are honestly some of my favourite weapons in video games. The corrosive slime can lets you dissolve enemies with acid, the X-18 Scrapmaker lets you shred through enemies like the frickin' heavy, the Energon Reaper shotgun stabs health from enemies with every successful hit, and the Gear Shredder shoots blades which can slice enemies in half. We also gain a different form of character abilities this time around, and the grenades of the previous game are replaced with assault and support tech. These are welcome new additions, and the new abilities and more varied level layout and enemy types gave you more of an incentive to actually use them, and the new tech is a lot more effective than the grenades ever were, seeing as one lets you create a localized black hole. Then there's a new addition to the gameplay. Certain levels that you play as Bruticus and Grimlock. These levels are some of the most fun you could ever have in a video game, replacing the shooter gameplay with a sort of beat 'em up crossed with hack and slash gameplay, and you can take down anything in a couple of swings. Downside is that Bruticus, Dinoform and Grimlock are a little slow, but that's easily overlooked given how much sheer power you're given for these levels. The multiplayer also returns too, with the basic gameplay modes returning, the escalation mode features more varied levels, enemy types, and gives you a lot more options to use when taking down enemies, and the standard team-based multiplayer matches now feature a much wider range of character customization, even allowing you to play as the other Dinobots. Granted, I didn't particularly enjoy the multiplayer this time around, as the Dinobots created a multitude of balancing issues, but I can give credit where it's due. I'm the Cyber Engineer, and Transformers Fall of Cybertron is one of my favourite games of all time, and it's at least in my top 20. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.